Hello and welcome to the teaching session transcript. I'm the Vicky Wen. So there are 4 steps of my presentation. So before we begin, I want to share a story about a friend of mine. A while ago, he just posted a selfie on Instagram, but not long after posting it, he found that a person in the comments was sending abuse comment about his picture and his body shape for being overweight. Do you think it's appropriate to post such a comment on the internet? Does this commenter have the right to make such comment? Okay, very good. Okay, very good. You all gave very intelligent comments, so let's move on. This topic of today's lesson is freedom of speech. Freedom of speech means that everyone has right to express his or her views without being restricted by government or other authority. This freedom is part of basic human rights. Its history can be traced back to many important documents and historical events, such as the first amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which establishes the freedom of press and speech, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which makes it clear that freedom of speech is right for everyone. However, attitudes towards freedom of expressions vary greatly from country to country and from one period of history to another. For example, in some totalitarian countries, freedom of speech is tightly controlled, while in others, it's highly protective. Okay, in modern society, there are some changes in the concept and the meaning of the free speech. Let's look at some practical examples of freedom of expressions in modern society. On social media, many people have been restricted for what they post, which has triggered a new debate about freedom of expressions. We can think about the question, should all speech be protected? Please break into small groups and discuss cases of freedom of speech that you know of, and know these cases affect freedom of speech. Then we will share the results of our discussion together. Okay, from the discussion, we realize that freedom of speech has boundaries, especially when it comes to hate speech, disinformation, and the public safety. How do we balance freedom of speech and the responsibility in our daily lives, such as at school and in the workplace? Consider this question, for example, on certain social media platforms. Some people have had their accounts banned for posting false information. Are these platforms just for doing this? Are these restrictions an infringement on freedom of speech, or do they protect the interest of society as a whole? Now, let's think about another question. Some countries have passed laws banning hate speech, believing that it can cause harm or even provoke violence against special groups. Should all countries adopt such laws, or should they have not such restrict prohibitions? Consider those 2 different situations and discuss how do you find a balance between freedom of expression and social responsibility. Under what conditions do you think freedom of expression should be restricted? What's the basis for these restrictions? Okay. Lastly, today we have discussed the definition, historical background, commentary, significance, and the challenges to freedom of speech. Through class discussions and activities, we can see that freedom of expression is not absolute. It requires finding a balance between protecting the individual's right to expressions and safeguarding the public interest. When exercising the freedom of speech, everyone should consider the possible impact of his or her speech on others and the society. Use the corpus moral responsibility and prevent the right to free speech from being abused. Okay, that's the end of today's teaching. Do you have any more questions?